shit. It's
Peace. John in New York.
Hello?
Hi, you're talking to Eric and Christy.
Hi, what's up?
Nothing much, man. We had
Hosting
somebody,
a YouTube show? What you got going on?
We had somebody call in who thought that they didn't realize they were guests on the no.
Okay.
What's up, man?
So I heard earlier you guys were talking about, well, actually just now because I could kind of hear it, you guys were talking about scientific evidence. So before I get into that, actually, what is your standard of belief? Do you require a rational justification?
I mean, I would hope so.
Right. So,
I mean, that's the goal. Let's acknowledge that we're all flawed and we have biases and different things, and that what we accept and believe is tricky, and that there's not necessarily a litmus test or like a specific moment where something steps from disbelief to belief. The goal is that we would try to think these things through, and that we would actually know what we believe, and we'd believe things intentionally that are reasonable and logical.
Okay, sure. So the standard of belief is that something has a rational justification or basis, right?
We try
ostensibly to the extent that it's available.
Okay. Sure. So you guys mentioned scientific evidences, and you guys asked for empirical evidence for the existence of God, but not just for the existence of God, for what that guy was saying, for a lot of things. Would you agree that causal connections between events and uniformity in nature is a necessary precondition for science?
Oh, you're a presuppositional apologist. And you called on my first time on the Atheist Experience. I'm really happy about this, John.
My question.
No, I will. I'm just saying thank you for calling.
This is just an interlude. He's getting warmed up. He's very excited in this moment.
I am. Okay. Please continue.
So I asked, do you agree that causal connections and uniformity in nature is a prerequisite for the scientific method and for science to be viable?
So I want to make sure I understand you.
Okay.
When you're talking about uniformity in nature, you're saying that an experiment done today is likely to prove the same results that experiment would be tomorrow or yesterday under the same conditions, correct?
That would be a part of it. It would be that basically the way to sum it up would be that nature operates in certain law-like ways. That there's some things that are static in nature, that we can generally expect the future to be like the past.
Yeah.
But the thing about experiments would be there too.
Sure. Okay. I until such time as that isn't the case, then that is pretty much our operant. That's what we do. I would say that we don't have capital T truth, and I would argue that capital T truth is impossible to get to. So we're always operating in degrees of confidence. What do you mean
when you say possible? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. What do you mean when you say capital T truth? What does that mean?
Absolute certainty about something, having some absolute perfect understanding of a thing. We operate in
comprehension.
No.
Functional understanding as opposed to perfect, overwhelming, concrete.
Yeah. So I think that's actually a feature, not a bug. Because so long as we are questioning and open to the fact that we may be wrong about something, we are keeping ourselves available to learn more about the world around us. So degrees of confidence.
And learning more about the world would come from evidences, right?
Well, I would think so. So where are we going?
My question was, so my question was, do you accept that in order for science and the scientific method specifically, or empirical endeavors, to be a viable and intelligible concept, you would have to have some law-like patterns that nature operates in, so that the future could be expected to be like the past, and that there is actually causal connections between events? Would you agree that that's a precondition for science?
Within a certain margin of error. I mean, any amount of science is going to recognize that there's high amounts of variability, that there are incredible numbers of factors that we may or may not be controlling for or aware of. So, again, like Eric said, we're looking towards a functional understanding of the world as opposed to a concrete one. So,
I just feel
functionally, what you're saying is true.
Yeah, preconditions. There's no point in having an experiment with the conditions being different. You want to try and replicate it.
You couldn't have an experiment without there being causal connections and the world operating in certain law-like patterns.
A certain law, like
I track.
That's a certain, yeah.
Yeah, it's
sure.
just weird language, but I'm fine with you so far.
Sorry.
No,
I'm
that's
sorry.
okay. Go ahead.
So my question is, do you believe that there are causal connections between events and that nature operates in certain consistent or law-like ways?
That appears to be the case.
That appears to be the case.
Is the question, does natural law exist? Because that's how I'm hearing it.
No, he's getting at epistemic justifications.
Mm-hmm. What is your justification for causality and laws of nature?
Got it. Why do I need it?
Because if you don't, then you'd be violating your own standard of belief that you mentioned a couple minutes ago, where you said you needed rational justification for things you believe.
Right. I don't need to be a mechanic to know how to drive my car, but when I need to get groceries, I can get in my car and drive to the grocery store and come back and have done so without a full understanding of how that car is working.
But a functional understanding of how cars operate.
Yeah.
That just seems like a cop-out out of having to justify your beliefs.
No, you're reading something in and you need to back it up before you can make that claim. So this example was, I tried to bring this example up because, I'm excited. It's my first time on AXP. Give me just a minute. It's my first.
That's fine.
Right? I know. The Book of Eric.
So can I just?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. I'll pick it back up.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
So basically, what I was getting at is, at the beginning, I asked, "Do you need is your standard of belief that you need a rational justification?" And you both agreed to that.
Right.
But then you said you believe in causal connections and law-like or uniformity in nature. And this is kind of what Hume pointed out. You really don't have a rational justification for that. So
do you?
If you don't have a justification, well, that's just a two-quote fallacy, right?
No, it's not. No, it's not. Because
no,
it's not.
If you don't have a justification,
holy crap! Are you just waiting for your turn?
Well, you're just pulling a two-quote fallacy.
No, I'm not. I will tell you why if you'll shut up for a second.
Okay.
Okay. Tu-quoque fallacy is invalidating you because you too. I'm not doing that.
Right,
I'm asking you, what is your justification? I want to know because apparently it sounds like you've got a bead on something better than me. So tell me, what is it?
Yeah, sure. So when we talk about the tu-quoque fallacy, it's not just simply saying you too. It would also be saying that I don't need to provide a justification because you can't provide a justification.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah, sorry. Let me be clear. I'm putting that on hold unless you can't talk because I need to. Do I need to respond to that before you'll answer anything?
Yeah, you need to be consistent with your standard of belief.
Yeah, and we went over it. You said it wasn't valid, and it sounds like you're inferring that you have it. So what is it?
Yeah, sure. So I would argue that God has set up the world to operate in certain law-like or uniform ways.
Okay, show me that God exists, and then show me that God has done that.
Oh, sure. Show you. When you say show you, is that an empirical? Are you asking for an empirical evidence?
Well, if it is going to be convincing, you got to start somewhere. How about evidence?
How about what? Sorry. In evidence?
Yeah, it's a Wayne's World thing.
Datum.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. So in evidence, well, I would argue that the Christian worldview is correct because if you deny the Christian worldview, you won't have a basis for proving anything.
Okay, so let's break that down just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm correct because if not, all you've done is throw shade. Why don't you prop up the Christian worldview instead of throw shade, bro?
That's not, what does that even mean?
It means that you're talking shit about what you think the other side is instead of propping up your position.
Why are you so angry?
Oh, that's cute. Come on.
Yeah.
We're having a conversation here.
So
Come on.
I'll answer your question, though. So I'm sure you've heard of the transcendental argument.
How are we tying this in? I'm losing the thread.
Well, because you asked me to prove the Christian worldview.
Okay.
So I would go about proving the Christian worldview. When we talk about worldviews, and we talk about the foundation of reality, which was what God would be if he, if he existed, right?
No, that's your definition.
But we're talking about proving the Christian worldview. We're not talking about proving a Zeus or
Are Mormons
Poseidon,
Christian?
right? That would be different. Yeah. So
are Mormons
when we talk
Christian?
about proving things. Wait, sorry. Go ahead.
Are Mormons Christian?
Are Mormons? That's not even relevant to what I'm saying right now.
So it is, because you're speaking on behalf of a group that you may not actually entirely feel is part of your group. And so I would love to be able to talk to you about what you think. And I want to make sure that you're not taking responsibility for people that are not part of your tribe. And so when you say the Christian worldview, and I ask you, are Mormons Christian? I'm trying to see and feel out, are you saying everybody who calls themselves a Christian? If everybody, anybody who says, hey, I'm a Christian, you're speaking for them? Or is there a little more to it?
I'm speaking for the Christian worldview that, Jesus Christ died and was resurrected, okay, that the Bible is the inerrant, infallible word of God, and that God is the ultimate context and necessary precondition for intelligibility. That's my worldview.
Perfect.
So let me just get back to my explanation.
Perfect. Now justify.
Can I get back to my explanation?
Well,
I brought up the transcendental argument. Can I just finish that?
Yeah, give the transcendental.
So when we talk about the transcendental. Yeah, so when we talk about proving worldviews, the way we would go about proving worldviews or a law of logic or causality would be different. It is called the crackers in the pantry fallacy. It'd be different than I would go about proving that the Earth rotates. So asking me for empirical evidence, asking me for a scientific experiment that concludes with God, is a crackers in the pantry fallacy. That's not the way we go about proving worldviews in philosophy.
So it totally depends. And I agree that in philosophy, you can have a worldview and be wrong.
Right.
We share this world, and we're trying to determine what is true, not what is internally consistent, right? What is true should be internally consistent. We would expect it that way. But I can come to you and say, hey, everything is an illusion. I'm a hard solipsist. It would be internally consistent, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it maps to the world that we're in.
I actually don't think it is.
You don't?
I don't think metaphysical solipsism. Are you talking about metaphysical or epistemic solipsism?
I'm trying to provide an example. If you get the point, cool. If not, I can give you an example.
I understand. So you're basically saying a worldview can be completely internally consistent and still be false.
Yes.
So I would actually disagree. I would argue the Christian worldview is the only worldview that is internally consistent and consistent with reality.
What about other religions? That's a pretty tough claim.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Islam. Islam, an example. Which religion?
Well,
whatever you're well versed in. I mean, give us literally anything that's internal.
No,
hold on. We're going a bit far afield. I want to make sure we're not getting too far off topic.
Yeah, we are too. But.
Yeah. So let's get back. No, dude, are you kidding me? We're in this conversation together. So no worries. We were talking about justifications for logic, essentially. How do you make sense of things if you don't have God? And what I've seen this conversation boil down to, and please tell me if I'm wrong, would be the laws of logic. Identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle, you have to have a justification for it to use it. That's my experience.
Yeah, sure. Well, the laws of logic are certainly a part of the transcendental argument, but it's not the full transcendental argument. Transcendental arguments aren't just for God. There's also our transcendental arguments for the laws of logic, but this boils down to anything. Basically, the transcendental argument, or as you call it, presuppositional apologetics, basically argues that the Christian worldview is true due to the impossibility of the contrary. So in the act of act of denying the Christian worldview, you're already going to be presupposing that the statement you're making is intelligible, which can only exist in the Christian worldview. So you're actually presupposing my worldview in order to deny it.
Do you remember playing tag as a kid? First person to run to the tree is immune. I'm
playing tag right now.
Yeah, it feels like you're giving me the argument from Ollie Ollie Oxenfree. You have access to it. I don't, by definition, that you're right and I'm wrong. Now, tell me where there's any value in that.
No, that's not what I said. Maybe it's a misunderstanding. Let me rephrase it. So
yeah, please.
Let's take it off the Christian worldview. Let's talk about a law of logic. So in metaphysics, Sure. Well, laws of logic, because you brought them up,
Sure.
right? So in Aristotle's Metaphysics, he references the sophists who deny the law of non-contradiction. And he basically says that he makes an argument that says the law of non-contradiction is true because it's impossible to deny it as being true. In the act of verbalizing a denial of the law of non-contradiction or identity, you're going to presuppose the law of identity or non-contradiction. It's impossible to deny it. And the verbalization of the denial leads you to absolute absurdity.
Because you're using the laws
That's
of
what I'm
logic
doing
to...
with the Christian worldview.
Yeah, you're using the laws of logic to prop up the laws of logic, which is inherently circular. How do you get away from that? Because
Get away from what? Circularity?
Yeah, that circularity in logic. Because I would say you and I have no choice but to. The only difference is you're saying because of, I'm not saying because of, and you need to justify why that is.
Well, when we talk about laws of logic, I'm not sure that you can even account for such a thing as laws of logic.
Yeah, so how is that not what I just said?
Right. If you can't account for laws of logic, then laws of logic don't exist in your worldview.
I'm glad you're repeating that to me. So I'm saying again, we're both in the same boat. Prove to me that you're not.
True.
Prove to me that you're not.
Yeah, sure. So,
show me.
Yeah, sure. So laws of logic are abstract reflections of God's eternal nature. And so anything God creates is going to reflect the laws of logic, including human beings.
I want you to look back at this conversation. And when you do, I want you to really, really try and plug in other things that this is something you're posting forward. You're saying this is a reflection of God. So we're already assuming and determining that God exists, and we're giving that God qualities. And then we're using that definition to justify that God, which is inherently circular. You can do better.
Right.
Try again.
Well, when we talk about circularity, at a foundational level, when we talk about the foundation of reality or your ultimate authority, so it would be incoherent for me to not be circular in proving the foundation of reality. So it's a little bit different than when you're talking about normal day-to-day endeavors.
So it sounds like what you're saying is we're kind of stuck, aren't we?
No, because I don't think circularity is always fallacious.
No,
I think it's fallacious.
I think that it may just be that the laws of logic are the laws of logic. And
I'm not saying you're wrong because you're circular. I'm not saying you're wrong because you're circular with the laws of logic. I only brought up the laws of logic with transcendental arguments to illustrate what I'm trying to do or what I am doing with the Christian worldview.
Right.
So what the transcendental argument seeks to prove is that it's impossible for you to deny that the Christian worldview is actual because in the act of denying it, you're presupposing it.
Got it.
And your denial leads to absurdity. You won't have a basis for the laws of logic. You won't have a basis for science. You won't have an ultimate concept.
Again, I can drive my car without being a mechanic.
No, you don't even have the car.
Oh, really? I can't use logic? Hold on. Tell me I don't know how to use logic. I dare you.
No.
He's arguing from the deeper magic from before the dawn of time. And because he's got a key to the source code, everything that he talks about sort of happens on some level that we can't perceive or discuss or really do anything about. So we just have to sort of take it for granted that it exists.
Maybe.
No, your worldview can't even provide for the car.
How?
Because the car...
I mean, that's definitely I ask you what you believe. I listen to you, and I want to make sure that I meet you where you're at. And that's doesn't seem like that's what you're doing. You're saying your worldview X. Ask me, hey, Eric, can your worldview account for logic? Well, it appears that I can use it. Can you use logic? Yeah, no, we agree. Okay, so what's the next step?
I agree you can use it. You can use it in the actual world, but I'm saying conceptually, your worldview cannot account for laws of logic because you have no foundation, not only just for laws of logic.
What do you mean account for?
Not only just to provide for. That the laws of logic are actually laws of logic, that they actually are intelligible and viable metaphysically in your framework.
Well, I mean, we can talk about numbers as abstract concepts and look at numbers and say, hey, that's not a thing that's existent, but it's a thing that we use. It's a concept that we use to be able to move forward in understanding things, right? It's useful. That doesn't mean that it exists.
Numbers presuppose logic. Math presupposes logic.
Hold on. Yeah, it's built on. We have an audience. I'm trying to
Okay.
give, examples here. And
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's all good. So we use these numbers to great effect, right? We have come up with the concept of the number 1. It has a very, very clear definition, and we move from there, right? Now,
Did we come up with the laws of logic?
that being the case, we've dug down, and it appears that we live in a universe where something has 3 very basic pieces to it. And 1, it is what it is, it isn't what it isn't, and it isn't what it is and what it isn't at the same time.
I'm kind of scared though. I'm afraid that you're still not getting my point. My point isn't that in the actual world, I agree that in actuality, I agree that you use logic, and that the laws of logic are absolute, universal, and invariant. What I'm saying is at the worldview level, your worldview makes the idea of laws of logic unintelligible and not viable.
Yeah, and
that's what I'm saying.
Again, ask me and don't say your worldview X.
Okay, sure, I'll ask you.
Because the thing is, like, I want to know about you, but it appears that you're telling me about me, and that's fine.
If you want, I'll ask you.
I feel like, okay, ask me.
Okay, so what in your worldview, what is the foundation of reality that provides for the actuality and intelligibility of all things which derive?
Don't know.
You don't know. So everything you're saying is in virtue of I don't know.
Well, it's in virtue of honesty. I think it is an honest position to say I cannot have, again, that goes back to capital T truth. I can work with degrees of certainty to understand the world around me, but if I need to have this kind of absolute certainty to account for things, I'll never get off the ground. It's a practical thing.
It is absolutely paralyzing, and it does miss the idea that there's a functional aspect to our understanding of the world and what comes out of all of this. You know, what this understanding of the world, what your worldview actually means in the way you go about your daily living.
I would say the virtue is the exploration itself.
Can I just hold on? You talked about probability, you talked about certainty and absolute certainty and certainty. I'm not saying that you have to be absolutely certain. I'm saying a state of affairs that is derivative, right? So like my keyboard, for example, that hasn't always existed in this form. That derived from somewhere else. Do you agree with that?
You bought it
it's
from
made
a
up of
store.
plastics and metals that were created.
There's derivative states of affairs. Yeah. So all I'm asking you is a derivative state of affairs that doesn't ultimately derive from anywhere, is that a derivative state of affairs? So
let's break this down. I am a firm believer that if you understand it, you can communicate it in smaller words. Okay, sure. Nothing comes from nothing. Is that about right?
No. Okay. Well, maybe not actually. I'll break it down. So the keyboard began to exist. Okay, in its form, the keyboard began to exist, and it's derivative. So is something that is derivative that doesn't actually ultimately derive from anywhere? That is a contradiction because it doesn't ultimately derive from anywhere. Do you understand that?
Yeah, that's by definition. You've created a circular argument.
Exactly. It's like a married, like a one-ended stick or two. You know what I mean? So
just like
a contradiction.
Just like saying you need God for logic, therefore God.
No, that's not the same.
Oh, it's not?
No, because I'm talking about...
God gives logic, there is logic, there is God. That is circular, right?
Derivative, well, it's not just logic, and I'm not talking about the circularity. I'm talking about...
No, I'm talking about it.
Affairs. Right, but that's not in response to what I'm saying, right?
Okay, go ahead.
What I'm talking about right now is derivative states of affairs have to have a foundation of reality from which they derive from. Otherwise, they're not derivative. And I'm asking you, every fact requires a context. A fact that doesn't have a context is not a fact at all. And you can't provide, you've admitted, you said, I don't know, the ultimate context for facts. So your worldview, there are no facts.
Okay,
it's just gibberish because...
Again, you've thrown the baby out with the bathwater. It's sad. I'll help. I'm going to go back in. I'm going in. Right? So as a child, I went to elementary school and I learned basic algebra, right? As I learned about it, my understanding of things got better. Now, it doesn't mean that I needed to have a absolutely ace algebra to be able to use algebra. and therein,
Oh,
I
okay.
wouldn't throw it out completely. We're learning, we're growing and adjusting as we go. And that is a virtue.
Yeah, but the thing is, I'm not saying that in the actual world you can't use laws of logic, because I believe that you're created in the image of God, and so you are endowed to think according to the laws of logic, right? But I'm saying your
cool story, bro. Why? Why do you posit that? Give me a justification.
Because due to the impossibility of the contrary.
Okay, when you can actually, justify yourself instead of trying to dismiss the other side, bring me evidence instead of saying, well, the other side just doesn't make sense.
Eric, you can't account for evidence, though. You can't account for causality and laws of nature. So you don't have the necessary preconditions for evidence. So why are you violating your own standard of belief?
Bullshit.
Through all of this, it feels like we've come back to that basic concept at the very beginning about a functional understanding of the world and what actually operates, what we can use.
I don't get what you're saying.
Yeah,
functional understanding.
Yes.
I'm talking about justification. You don't have a justification.
Show me that I need this justification. Back to the mechanic argument.
Hold on. No, it's not the mechanic argument, right? You don't have, your worldview doesn't provide for the necessary preconditions for science or evidence.
Show me that.
Okay? So when you ask me for evidence, you're in violation not only of your worldview, but your standard of belief, which you told me at the beginning, that you need a rational justification.
Yeah, you're running from the question. Evidence. No, you're running from the question and dismissing me by saying ollie ollie oxenfree.
I answered your question.
By saying that the alternative doesn't make sense. I don't know how that doesn't strike you as supremely dishonest. Not you, but the argument itself.
I don't think that you're okay. So the argument isn't just that it doesn't make sense without God. The argument is that you can't even have the idea of sense or laws of logic or coherency can't exist outside of the Christian worldview.
Justify that.
You can't account.
Justify that.
Yeah, sure. So what is it in your worldview?
Oh wait, I asked you about your worldview. Try again.
Right.
Your worldview. Quit pointing at me.
And the way we talk.
Describe yourself.
Eric,
who are you?
Do you know what a reductio ad absurdum is?
I do, and what?
Right.
So asking you to justify yourself is just fallacious.
Hold on. No, it's not fallacious. I'm not saying it's fallacious. What I'm saying is that this goes back to the crackers in the pantry. When we talk about worldviews, the way I go about proving my worldview as a package is true is by showing that that this is the only coherent worldview, and it's the only worldview that can account for intelligibility, metaphysically speaking. And any other worldview is going to lead you to absurdity and incoherence.
And you are doing that by special pleading.
No.
Yes.
That's not special pleading.
Yes, it is.
No.
Yes, it is.
Do you know what special pleading is?
I do. You're giving yourself special permission that nobody else gets. Because you get to say ollie ollie oxenfree. I justify it because I do, but nobody else can do that because they're not Christians. Oh, no. I'm sorry. Try calling back, but rational is, well, it could be internally consistent, but in mapping to the world that we're in, no. Oh, I hung up on him, by the way. All right.
No, I think you had it right. It is sort of its own special brand of solipsism. It's this idea that, everything is within this little perfect bubble that I'm creating exactly the way I say it is within the bubble. And we can't operate with anything else. It all completely misses out on the fact that we can sit in ivory towers and have these conversations, and there's value in that. That's why we have this show. And I don't mean to come in and dismiss that. But it really spends a lot of time walking around some much plainer, much more obvious, much more human aspects of the so-called Christian worldview.
Well, and
never mind the internal consistency of the scriptures and things along those lines.
But and that varies by person. Really, honestly, there are as many Christian worldviews as there are Christians.
Sure, and I'm very quick to point out, we as humans, again, it's a functional understanding of the world. These categories that we create are really just ways of organizing for our brains, which are weak and,
I got you.
limited.
The only reason I bring it up is because he's not speaking for all Christians.
No, that's certainly true. That's clearly true.
And in doing that, he's already It doesn't really work out. But that is the nature of presuppositional apologetics. You don't get to posit that I'm right, therefore I'm right. You actually got to back your shit up. So back your shit up. Ask me, hey, Eric, how do you account for the laws of logic? Well, they work. Well, that's not good enough. Okay, good for you. How do you account for the laws of logic? Well, you can't. No, that's not what I said. How do you account for the laws of logic? Well, you can't. Do we see a problem here? So, anyway, let's move on.